Hi everyone, and welcome to Research Strategies Mods 3.1 to 3.6. Here are your learning objectives, and here's your vocab. Pause if you need to. When we look at psychological research, we are going to apply the scientific method. I'm sure you're familiar with this. So we create a hypothesis, we conduct research, make observations, and we look at our data to see if we can if our hypothesis was correct. There are different factors that can influence when we are looking at data or when we are conducting research, so we have to be careful of these things. For example, confirmation bias can occur, and that's the tendency to focus on information that supports our hypothesis or our theory. So we have to be careful that that is not happening in our research or in others' research that we are looking at. And there can also be participant bias. This is the tendency for research participants to behave a certain way because they're expecting that we want a certain outcome. So if you were in an attention study and you knew it was a paying attention study and they hand you a fidget toy, you might try to focus more and pay more attention because you think they're trying to prove that fidget toys. We're going to go over a couple of different types of research methods. These are overlapping, meaning like you can use some of these together. We're not going to go over experiments today, though. That will be in the next video. So one type of research method is a naturalistic observation. In the case of this research, it's likely necessary that you have to go to the environment in order to collect your data. For example, if you were trying to understand how students might clean in the dining hall after they have eaten, you would be most successful to go to the dining hall and not recreate that dining hall scenario in a lab or controlled setting. So obviously that has some limitations to it because you can't control the environment. So if the head of school walks in and says, everyone clean your tables, they look a mess. Well, now your data might be skewed. Maybe that doesn't happen all the time. You can also use case studies to learn about different things in psychology and to research. So this can be useful when we are looking at someone who has experienced something that not a lot of other people have experienced. And it's not something that we would necessarily want to repeat in other people. So it's where we study one person in depth to look for universal principles that we can apply to psychology. The problem with that, as it clearly states, is like you can't always use one person and what happened to one person and apply it to everyone else. So that is a big limitation to a case study. An example of a case study would be someone who experienced severe neglect and abuse as a child, such as Jeannie, the wild child in this picture here. And when they discovered her and started to help her, she was 12 years old. So this is not something that you would ever want to replicate, but it also gave them information about how we learn language, how we learn to socialize, that they wouldn't otherwise have. You can also do a correlational study. So this is a research strategy where we're looking for how much two variables are related to each other. So the word is right in the word. Correlation, relation. The key here is that you can never say from a correlational study that one variable causes the other. It is not a cause and effect. Correlation does not mean causation. That's worth writing down. Correlation does not mean causation. So, for example, students who watched more TV have lower GPAs. This could be a correlational study where you collect data, put it on a scatter plot, and you find a pattern. In this case, it's a negative correlation. When one goes up, TV watching, So there are positive correlations and negative correlations, and you need to know the difference. So a positive correlation is when both variables are going up. So for example, the more one listens to music, the better they're studying. That would be a positive correlation. They're both going up. A negative correlation is when one variable goes up, the other one goes down. So take our same scenario. The more one listens to music, the less effective their studying is. There can also just be no correlation at all, and that's when they put the data on the scatter plot and realize that there is no pattern. Can also use the survey method in psychological research. So this is great because you can ask questions to a lot of people very efficiently, easily, and get a lot of data, right? And we like the more data, the better. If you do a study and you only ask 5 people, that's not really even a study, right? The more people we can ask or get involved, the better. But there's a lot of weaknesses to the survey. So perhaps the way the wording on the survey was, the person was influenced to answer a certain way. Or perhaps the question itself they were uncomfortable with and they didn't want to answer honestly. So it's great in how many people we can ask, but it's bad in that people can lie or be influenced by the question themselves. When we are surveying people, we want to think about, or doing any kind of study, we want to think about the population we are trying to make a hypothesis about. So if you're trying to make a hypothesis about all freshmen in college in the United States, that would be your population, freshmen in college in the United States. A random sample would say, okay, well, we can't survey literally every freshman in college right now in the country, but we can get a representative sample of that group. And what that means is it's going to be at random who is surveyed. If I only surveyed people who attended a college in Massachusetts, then that wouldn't really be representative of all students. Longitudinal study is a research that would look at the same individuals and collect data from them throughout their lifespan for over a long period of time. So this is great because you're looking at the same group of people, and let's say you're examining how intelligence affects their life throughout their whole life, right? From maybe 5 to 70 years old. The weakness of this is it's obviously very time consuming and can be expensive and just difficult in general because people go in and out of contact. So a better alternative in many cases might be a cross-sectional study where you can compare individuals who are various ages all at once. So you have 70-year-olds, 5-year-olds, 20-year-olds, etc., and you're assessing how their intelligence affects their life all in that one time. So that's obviously easier, more efficient, but the weakness is that now you have different people, so you have other factors. So for example, the education that someone who is now 70 received in high school or college is very different from the education that someone who is 20 years old experienced. So their experience in intelligence or education can't exactly be compared because it was a whole different type of education they were receiving. Takeaways. Remember, we must use scientific research to avoid things like confirmation bias and participant bias. When we are looking at studies, we need to use our critical thinking skills. Case studies are great in learning about things that we otherwise can't learn about, but it's one person, so it's limiting in that way. A correlational study can show us the relationship between two variables, but not cause and effect. Surveys are great because they can easily give us info, but it can be inaccurate. Longitudinal studies, think of the word long, so it's same people over a long period of time, whereas a cross-sectional is across age groups, all at the same time. And that sums up Mod 3.1 to 3.6, and I will see you in